think he might have gotten the nickname at some points just for being a hairier than usual party guy. And he just sort of embraced it and was like, I'm the Wook. My band is called the Wooks.
Greetings, everybody. Keith Billick here. Welcome to the Picky Fingers Banjo Podcast. It is kind of a wild time here at Picky Fingers HQ, and I guess to tell you about it, first off, I will apologize that this episode is going to be a couple days late. It didn't greet you on Monday like you might be accustomed to. On Sunday, we noticed that our internet was not working, which, of course, in this day and age is a first world emergency. And by Sunday night, we realized it was going to involve mailing us a hardware unit replacement. And it became very apparent very quickly that Keith's podcast that he pours his little heart and soul into was not going to be ready in time. So I appreciate all of your patience. But as of last night, those sweet internet juices are flowing again, which brings me to the next item of craziness. I'm luckily having just enough of a window here to get this episode out before I depart for Dell Fest, where I will be all weekend and hopefully bring you some interviews that I obtain there. And then as soon as I get back from that, I will be getting ready to go to Midwest Banjo Camp. So if any of you are going to be in any of those places, come track me down and say hey, and if you ask nicely, I'll have a cool Picky Fingers sticker to hand to you. So we've already learned that this podcast cannot go on without the internet, but we've known for a long time that this podcast cannot go on without support from listeners who go to patreon.com/banjopodcast. This episode's special listener Patreon subscriber is Scott Wright. Scott, thank you so much for your generous support of the show. I really appreciate it, and it definitely helps. For the rest of you, head over to that site, patreon.com/banjopodcast. It only costs a few bucks a month to support the show. That's less than a price of a cup of coffee or a beer or a bottle of kombucha, whatever your fluid of choice is. You can get this for less and have the satisfaction of knowing that you're helping me out. And you get cool stuff. I don't talk about this enough, but one of the prizes is you get music tracks of my intro and outro music, and included with those is banjo tablature for both of those pieces of music. You also get invited to monthly video hangouts, the VIP lounge for very important pickers, and some of you get the episode shoutouts. So you can read all about it. Once again, patreon.com/banjopodcast. Other ways to support the show, please like, rate, review, subscribe, whatever your app lets you do. Track me down on the socials. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or just drop me a line anytime to give me some feedback or suggestions. I'm at pickyfingersbanjopodcast@gmail.com. Today's featured guest is George Guthrie, a Nashville-based singer and banjo player who has been playing mainly these last several years with the Wooks. Now, in between this interview and when this episode is coming out, the Wooks actually announced that they are going on hiatus. So, although you might not be able to see George perform with them, at least not in the real near future, he will undoubtedly be adding his banjo talents to other groups around Nashville and around the country. Most notably, my former bandmate and good friend Joshua Rilko. Whenever he puts a bluegrass band together, George is usually a part of that. And I should clarify, Josh Rilko is my former bandmate, but still is a current good friend. I feel like that sounded weird. But anyway, George is definitely an up-and-coming banjo talent on both three-finger and clawhammer playing. And one other thing I should mention is my typical thanks to Otis Supply, which is a local venue here in Ferndale, Michigan. It's a great place to go see live music. They book bands like the Wooks and are always very gracious about letting me invade their space with my microphones and recording equipment to make these types of interviews possible. So thank you to them. And then also a disclaimer, you are going to hear some crowd noise in the background, and that's just the Otis vibe happening. So here it is. Enjoy the interview with George Guthrie.
I'm from Connecticut originally. I was not a banjo player there. I did grow up playing music. I came from a somewhat musical house. My sisters and I took piano lessons as kids, and we were all really into music. But I was really the only one who was interested in pursuing it to any serious degree. So I started playing guitar in high school and got really into that.
Was that bluegrass already?
It was, yes. So when I was in high school, I went to a boarding school in Virginia. Mm-hmm. And before then, I had not heard any bluegrass really at all. I was into the Grateful Dead and some other, maybe artists that could have been adjacent to bluegrass in some ways. So I think I knew that it was a genre.
Yeah.
That's about all I knew. But when I got to this boarding school in Virginia, my guitar teacher was and still is a great musician. His name's Jesse Harper. He was in a band called Old School Freight Train back in the day.
Cool. And he's in Love Cannon now, is that right?
He's in Love Cannon.
Yeah, cool.
Yep. And so he kind of got me started on bluegrass. Or I think I went in one day and I was like, oh, I've heard about this genre named bluegrass. Like, well, what can you tell me about it? And he was like, well, bring me your iPod. This is back when iPods were a thing, And he's like,
I still have mine.
I'll load up your iPod with all this stuff. But at that time I was still just a guitar player, and it wasn't until I was 19 in my first or second year in college at UVA in Charlottesville, and I started taking banjo lessons from Adam from Love Cannon.
Oh, how cool.
So he was like my first banjo teacher, and honestly one of the first players I really got to see like up close. And
that's Adam Larrabee for people who are not.
That's right, Adam Larrabee. Amazing musician, amazing banjo player, amazing guitar player, and teacher. And his style is so varied and diverse that it was kind of a crazy introduction to banjo,
Yeah, I'm really curious to hear all about like how he teaches and what he got you into, because he plays bluegrass,
but he also has this extensive jazz and classical background, and so a lot of that informs the way he teaches. And I can't claim to play in his style, but one thing he did instill in me is sort of a more, you might call it like a literary approach to the banjo. He just taught me, he's like, learn how to read tab, and learn a little bit about reading music. And, that really helped me as I, struck out on my own banjo journey. I was like buying books about banjos, and I tried to just consume as much information as I could, and I think that was not really the way I did it with guitar. Guitar was kind of more of just like a freewheeling, playing by ear thing. But banjo, I took a studious approach to it.
I guess I never even heard what was it that made you want to pick it up in the first place. You were already playing guitar. What made you dive into it?
I wish I had like some cool story about an epiphany, but really, I liked bluegrass and just kind of wanted to just diversify. And like I noticed that a lot of bluegrass players play multiple instruments, and I've been doing guitar for a while, and I was like, this is fun, but maybe I'll just pick it up as banjo up as like a side instrument or something,
Okay.
And I did, and that's kind of how it remained for the first few years that I played. It was just sort of something that I would bust out at a jam when there wasn't a banjo player or something.
Yeah.
And then I just started getting involved in these bands in the Charlottesville area, mainly just because there weren't that many banjo players, I just kind of fell in love with it, I got really into it. And
were you taking a pretty straightforward bluegrass approach at that point? Or like, I don't know, maybe what are some of the players that you got into and stuff?
Yeah, totally. I mean, in high school, I was really into like the early formation of the String Dusters. I still love that band, but they were like a young band that brought like a youthful energy that excited me a lot. I love Panda's playing. So they were, influential, but definitely when I started studying with Adam, he hipped me to a lot of cool stuff. He's like, check out Noam McKelney and check out, Leon Hunt and all these cool players. And I think then I moved to Colorado in and so I stopped studying with Adam, because I moved away. But I was also kind of getting more into the really traditional styles of bluegrass banjo. I was like going and listening to Earl and JD and also some more contemporary trad players like, Ron Stewart and Sammy Sheeler and a lot of that stuff too. And, more, I think those guys maybe more than anything like inspire the way I play in a band, like the Wooks, for example, because a lot of it's pretty down the line, that bluegrass groove. And
I'm glad you mentioned that. I was going to make that observation that like for somebody whose first teacher was Adam and he's turning you on to Noam McKelney and Leon Hunt, like the way you play doesn't necessarily reflect those beginnings, but that makes a lot of sense to hear that you also went that direction.
Definitely. Yeah. And then, somewhere along the way, I got really into old time music and I started learning clawhammer banjo. And that's a whole other universe, that is a totally different instrument, basically. Or, the right hand is, but it's a banjo.
No, in fact, I'll just do a brief sidebar. Yeah, you're an excellent clawhammer player too. And something that was funny for me to experience was one of Josh's tracks that I got to record with him, Three Finger. I've heard you perform with him playing clawhammer.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So it's really interesting just to hear the difference.
For sure.
It's really cool.
Yeah, totally.
Is that Floating the Buffalo?
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
you play clawhammer on that one, right?
I think I do. Yeah. I mean, when he showed that tune to me, I had heard a version that I guess you played on. I was like, that's killer. But, maybe since there's already a great 3-finger version, maybe I'll just see what this other style has to offer, and now whenever I play a gig with Josh, I usually bring the clawhammer like to play just that one song.
Yeah.
Or maybe we do one other one. But I've started incorporating it in the Wooks a little bit, and there might be a few tunes tonight that we play where I'll drop the thumb, as they say.
Cool. It seems like you almost had two different types of upbringing, the progressive stuff that Adam was teaching you,
for sure,
and then you got into what you said, like Ron Stewart and those more meat and potatoes kind of guys,
for sure.
If you could point to something that you've taken from each of those worlds that like you still use a lot, is there something that comes to mind?
For sure. One thing that I really like about a player like Ron Stewart is like he plays like the most simple, powerful thing at the right time, and it's always sort of like serving the song in a tasteful way, and I'm really drawn to that. I love the banjo, but I really love just the sound of bluegrass and that groove and the way the banjo fits into that, And I'm also, I sing in most of the groups that I play in too, so that forces me to approach the banjo in a slightly different way. Because, there's a lot of complicated stuff happening in the right hand. And when I have to deliver a song, I try to like isolate what are the most important things about the role of the banjo in this particular tune and only do those things.
Yeah, I wish there was I know that's an awkward thing to ask you to demonstrate because it's more of a concept than a lick or a skill. But does anything...
Yeah, so, one thing that I think about is what am I doing in between a vocal phrase, like, what's the song? Like, Girl of Mine in Tennessee, well, a long, long time ago when I left my home to roam down in the hills of Tennessee, like putting a lick there.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I'll just like, maybe just be very lightly playing. Sorry, hit the mic there. Be very lightly playing, and then in those spaces, I'll play a little more forward, or hitting a lick like that to fill in that space.
Mm-hmm.
More so than trying to worry about what role am I going to play through this whole verse while I'm also singing, It tends to be more of a fill-based approach. But there are also rolls that I can kind of keep going, when... That's a really useful one. It feels very it lines up nicely on the beats and just has that, the roll flavor to it.
Yeah, like just enough syncopation to be interesting, but just establishes
totally.
that sound.
Right. But, getting back to, sort of the more progressive stuff I started out with, I guess I play more trad now maybe than I was trying to early on in my playing, but there's moments of sort of more jammy improvisation in the set that the Wooks do, for example, where some of those definitely non-trad concepts might come out, like a triplet thing or a more chromatic, melodic run kind of thing.
Would you say that you're more drawn to a straight-ahead traditional approach than you are, a Gnome Pikelny sound for some reason?
I suppose maybe I am. It's not that I don't admire those and love those guys a lot, but yeah, I just kind of like that really powerful down the line sound, and that's kind of what we lean on in the Wooks a lot more, and so that tends to be what I focus on. But I'm always trying to acquire new skills. There was actually a period that I went through when I was living in Colorado where I was learning a lot of like fiddle tune arrangements and stuff like that, and that's where like a player like Gnome, his way of interpreting that would, I might check that out, because he's kind of the key master.
What do you mean that you were learning fiddle tune arrangements? You were writing your own,
just
variations,
like learning like a melodic version of a fiddle tune, that not like a Scruggs style, like a Turkey in the Straw. Stuff like that, up the neck or whatever it is.
And that was something you hadn't done before that? Explored like those fiddle tunes?
No, that was like honestly like what the stuff that I was into when I first started playing. And a lot of that starts to bleed into the old time world where I also like to hang out and listen. And, when I first started playing bluegrass, I don't think I really knew the difference between old time and bluegrass. There are even some jams in Virginia where I would go and I'd be like, why is everyone just playing the melody? Like
over and over.
Yeah. But I was really enjoying it, and I obviously came to realize that it's a different genre, and there's different aesthetics. And,
so I'm inclined to ask you more about your three-finger playing just because that's what I know, but I don't know, since you mentioned that, maybe go into what you see as like for a bluegrass player to come on across an old time jam, it is kind of weird, but what would you explain to them as being like, no, you just don't appreciate this about it?
Well,
like what is that thing?
I love how it's all about the groove, and just the collective sound you make. It's not so much about trying to take a hot solo, though that's cool in some settings. But it's cool to kind of go into this trance zone and just like really lock in on the whatever you're doing in that tune to serve the groove, and that's really fun. I'm really into that. And there's this whole other canon of tunes too that are you don't find in the bluegrass world. And a lot of them have, weird twists and turns, and I love that too, I love
the crooked ones, you mean?
Yeah, like crooked tunes, you're in a jam and this tune pops up and everyone's playing it and you're like, this is crooked as all get out. But after you play for 10 minutes, you got it, and that's satisfying too.
Except if you're anything like me, then you promptly forget it. Right before the next time you might have to play it, and then you have to learn it again from scratch.
Yeah, totally.
Guess got to keep at it, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure.
So what even took you to Colorado?
Man, I kind of moved there on a whim. I'd been in Virginia for like almost 10 years, and I just like wanted to get out, and I love skiing and hiking, and like obviously, like everyone else who lives there. But I was like, I'm just going to go try and live in Colorado, and I'd been out there to to Rocky Grass a few times and made some picking buddies, and they were like, "Oh, you gotta come, man! Like the scene's awesome. Like all these bands, they're gonna want you to play." And I was like, "Okay, cool."
Yeah, that sounds cool. Is that where you live? Like around?
I lived in Denver.
Okay.
Yeah. And I joined a few bands out there, and it was super fun. And everyone thought I was like the super trad banjo player, It was really funny. So, but there's a huge following of bluegrass in Colorado, like one of the most devout followings of anywhere in the country, I would argue. Like there's just so much audience for it.
Yeah, it's funny that you say. I was just lamenting earlier today that I've talked to people from out there, and they say every night of the week you can find a jam to go to, and often like a high level.
Definitely,
jam.
Yeah.
And that's just that we don't have that around here.
Yeah, yep. It's a cool spot for sure.
But by comparison, you were like this pretty zipped up kind of.
Well, like I just they're like, "Oh, this is a banjo player. You just came here from Virginia," and I was like, and a lot of the folks out there come from a different perspective on the music. That bands like Yonder and Salmon have opened the door to them.
Sure.
They might have been jam band fans, and then they heard a band like Yonder, Salmon, and then got into it.
Mm-hmm.
So they have a lot of that like sort of freewheeling, exploratory energy, which is awesome. But like they also want to play like Pig in a Pen at 180 beats per minute, and so anyone who goes out there with sort of more of a trad background is like immediately welcomed in because they recognize that they're like, oh, they want to sort of like learn about the more trad aspects of the music. And
so that was like actually a compliment for them to identify you like that. It wasn't
absolutely no
okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure about that.
Yeah.
So did you live there right up until you moved to Nashville?
No, I actually lived in Brooklyn for a year.
Oh, man, you've bounced around quite a bit.
I had a stint up there, and then I moved to Nashville in May of 2020.
I was just going to bring that up because seeing you on the live streams, I think that's always how they introduced you, that you're the person who decided to move to Nashville during the pandemic.
Yeah. Well, I had been thinking about it for a while before the pandemic hit, and then when it hit, it seemed like definitely the right time to get out of New York. It was so rough there. That's really where the first wave hit, and it was like lockdown to the max. But yeah, it just was the right time, and I realized pretty quickly after moving to New York that I'm not a big city guy. Like it's just a little too hectic for me. I like to, hear the birds chirping.
Small town Nashville.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it, but it does have kind of a sort of the more outskirts areas where I live. It definitely feels more like a small town.
And you don't have to. I'm kind of joking, but yeah, you don't have to drive very far to get to a hiking place or something.
Not really.
Like it's not that big of a deal.
Not at all. Yeah,
cool.
It's pretty cool.
So by then you were obviously like committed to doing the music thing, like as a living.
I think the only way I've been able to do that is because I play a pretty obscure instrument. One banjo gig has just continuously led to the next banjo gig for the last like 8 or 9 years or something. So I'm very lucky. I do play some other instruments, and I sing, and I try to do other things in music besides just play banjo to be a little bit diverse. But.
Well, yeah, I would love to talk to you about that then, especially because most of your Nashville existence has been under this pandemic umbrella. Like,
for sure.
What are some types of, for anyone out there who wants to go to Nashville and make it big as a banjo player, like what are some skills that will help you land in town and have people notice you and want to invite you and hire you to play this instrument for them?
Well, being highly skilled at your instrument is probably the most important thing, but it seems like a big thing that a lot of these successful musicians are doing, these freelance guys and girls and whoever are, have great self-promotional skills. And I mean that in like, keeping the content coming on social media and stuff like that seems to really be something that a lot of these successful pickers are doing now, and I kind of admit that I need to step my game up a little bit on that.
Oh,
front.
you and me both.
But things like having a Patreon and having like a weekly video that you put out, like, really helps people just become aware of you. So that's definitely something that I notice a lot of successful Nashville musicians doing.
So you think that's a way to get noticed by people more than maybe like...
Yeah, maybe more so than being like the most virtuosic picker, although that's definitely important. And also just being a good hang, being willing to jump in on various projects. Kind of just got to say yes to a lot of things.
Yeah.
And I try to do that when I can.
Is the Wooks your main gig at this point?
It has been, yeah, for the last year or something. We since we kind of came back from the pandemic, we've been touring and staying pretty busy. But I'm also a gun for hire in town down there. I jump in with other projects like Josh, for example. And going out to California next week actually to do some gigs with Lori Lewis out there. I don't know.
Oh, how cool!
Yeah. Patrick,
how great.
Patrick is unavailable for some reason.
Pat Sauber.
Yeah.
Okay.
Amazing player, man.
Yeah.
I've
on like every instrument.
Oh yeah, totally. Great player. I've been learning some of his breaks recently, trying to just like prepare.
How's that going for you?
It's good, man. He's got a really amazing trad banjo sensibility. I really like the way he blends, and he's got great dynamics, and he's an amazing banjo setup guy too, and his banjos always sound incredible. So
how does going back to like, what does it take in Nashville to get noticed and get jobs? Lori Lewis hires you from California. How does somebody like that?
Her booking agent currently lives in Nashville, and he's a guy I know, a guy named Jacob Grootman. Great guitar player. Yeah, I'm sure you guys have run into each other. Yeah. So, she needed a sub for this like one run, and she's like, there's no one in California anymore. Are there any banjo players in Nashville? And he's like, I know this guy.
There's a few of them. Yeah.
That's kind of how it happens.
Oh, that's great.
So just like being on the scene and going to picking parties, going to shows, and
Folks, we are in a golden age of online instrument instruction, and at the top of that world is Peghead Nation. Peghead Nation has streaming video courses in banjo, guitar, mandolin, fiddle, dobro, upright bass, and ukulele, so you can learn bluegrass, old time, and plenty of other styles from some of the most talented players and instructors in all of roots music. Check out the courses they have, and this is just for banjo. You could get beginning or bluegrass banjo with Bill Evans, clawhammer banjo with Evie Layden, Wade Ward style banjo with Bruce Molsky, the banjo according to Danny Barnes, and contemporary bluegrass banjo with Wes Corbett. Each of those courses include high-quality video lessons, downloadable notation and tab, play-along tracks, and plenty of tunes and songs to play. And the best thing yet is you're going to get your first month free just by being a listener of this show. So go to pegheadnation.com and use promo code pickyfingers at checkout and claim your free month of the best instruction out there. And if you find yourself needing a banjo or accessories to get ready for those Peghead Nation courses, I highly recommend you check out Elderly Instruments, which is the world's most trusted source of new, used, and vintage stringed instruments, including banjos, guitars, violins, mandolins, ukuleles, all that stuff. They're going to have the best instruments you can find anywhere, and we're talking everything from the more affordable instruments for people starting out on up through the most highly sought-after vintage instruments. Elderly Instruments has been family-owned since 1972, and if you can't make it to their Lansing, Michigan showroom, you can see their full selection at elderly.com or give them a call at 517-372-7880 for some professional advice on all of your banjo and other stringed instrument needs. And you know what all these stringed instruments have in common? They all sound better with GHS strings. GHS Strings is another sponsor of the Picky Fingers Banjo Podcast, and I'm proud to say they have been made in Battle Creek, Michigan since 1974. And if you don't want to take my word for it, maybe you'll believe such people as J.D. Crowe, Sonny Osborne, and Bela Fleck, just a few of the many, many users of GHS strings. So go check them out, ghsstrings.com. They have a wide selection of gauged sets so that no matter what you're looking for, you'll be able to find something there. So let's talk a bit more about your playing. So you've had all these different influences, the old time influence, the progressive, the bluegrass. How would you describe your style now, and what are there any particular skills that you rely on a lot for whatever you would consider your style to be?
Yeah. Lately I've really been trying to improve my right hand, and just...
Ooh, yeah.
Because
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I feel like that's really for straight ahead bluegrass, which is, I would say pretty much is where my 3-finger banjo playing mainly lives. That's kind of like what you got to do to keep it steady.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to rely a lot on a few different roles.
Okay.
And so, I'd be happy to demonstrate anything you'd like,
all of this stuff, and I actually want to go back and hear about how you work on your right hand technique. But
sure.
if you're talking about roles, we can dive into that.
I mean, so I mentioned singing and playing the banjo, but just the power of a forward roll is kind of just irresistible to me. Throwing a Scruggs lick in here and there. And I just use that all the time playing backup and while I'm singing. And, as far as my leads go, this is kind of like, again, where the trying to sound like a guy like Ron Stewart comes in. I really just want to play the most powerful version of the melody. That's really all I want to do, in a bluegrass setting.
I know I'm putting you on the spot, but is there a trad tune that you could maybe demonstrate how to really just buckle it down and try to put it in that forward roll type of context?
Yeah, so we just worked up this tune in sound check, this tune Up and Down the Mountain,
Mm-hmm.
we like to do that sometimes. Just, hey, what's a random bluegrass tune? And I haven't transcribed anyone's break on this, but I just might play something like I'm a little rusty right now, but just trying to find those melody notes, and how you might build a roll around that is something I'm really fascinated by, and I think is one of the things that makes the banjo a unique and mysterious instrument, So, that tune, for example, the first Up and Down the Mountain, we're just hanging there on that root note,
Right.
That might be how I play that bit of the melody. Up and down the mountain, kind of cheating there. Raising Cain till the break of dawn, something like that.
And that would be your solo break,
that would
not
be my
just
solo,
necessarily a kickoff or something like that.
Or it could be a kickoff.
Yeah.
I don't claim to be a great Scruggs style player or interpreter of the melody, but that if someone wanted to know what I'm trying to sound like, that in a bluegrass setting, that might be how I would respond to that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's kind of my approach.
Let's go back to what you said about how you've really been working on your right hand. What sort of things do you do to improve your right hand? And do you have a goal in mind, or just keep chipping away?
I try to practice with a metronome, but lately I've also been realizing that that's not the only thing you should do. Playing with other people regularly is really important, because you need to be able to respond to someone who doesn't have metronomic timing. Nobody does really at the end of the day. So playing with a metronome is great, but playing with other people is really important. And I wish I could say I've arrived at like the perfect right hand technique, but it seems to always be changing. But I was watching this like interview with Alan Mundy earlier today, as a matter of fact, and like he mentioned something about right hand position, and he just said something to the effect of, if you just take your right hand and you rest just the very tips of the picks on, say, the first, third, and fifth string, that should kind of give you an idea of what your resting hand position should look like, And, one thing I'm trying to do is increase my speed, and I feel like in order to do that, I need to know, like, what is my resting position? Where should my fingers come back to after they're moving, because if you have erratic hand movements in any of your right hands, it's going to increase the distance that the finger needs to travel to get to the string. It's going to slow you down and make you not play as powerfully,
So that's something you actually think about, is what your fingers are doing when you're not
for sure
striking a note.
Yeah. And one thing I realized I was doing is my thumb was getting a little too like out away from the strings or something. And also I think about how like my stance affects my right hand. Like I have really long arms and I've noticed that like if I hold the banjo a little bit, like if I turn my body a little bit to the left, so like it's like almost like my right shoulder is pointing more towards the audience, I feel like that helps me relax my right hand for some reason. So it's just these like, micro things.
It doesn't take much, does it?
That, can really make you feel more comfortable. And so things like that, as far as like exercises go, like I try to run all the rolls, you got your alternating thumb roll. Is that what most people call that? I call it an alternating thumb roll.
Yeah, or a square roll.
A square roll.
Yeah.
So put the metronome on and do that. And then the forward reverse roll, and also there's permutations of that. Getting the fourth string involved. That might be something I would do as a warm-up. And also, the Foggy Mountain breakdown roll. On all the strings. Putting the metronome on and doing those things is always like a good warm-up for sure. But also, not forgetting about the left hand either, because
right.
Sometimes if my left hand, I spend a lot of time thinking about the right hand and then I don't warm up the left hand and then I think that it's my right hand which is dragging, but it's actually the left.
Right.
And, I'm not hitting these frets with, on a good angle and cleanly, and that really affects it too.
Yeah. Everything's just a work in progress all the time.
And there's really no like point at which you have to stop doing these fundamental things. That's what I'm learning the further I get into banjo.
Yeah, me too. It seems like at any given point, I'm just like, okay, what do I feel the worst about my own playing? I'll work on that today.
Yeah.
Like, what have I been flubbing lately?
Do you mind me asking what it is you're working on these days?
A lot of the same thing. Note separation has been really big for me lately. Like if I had to critique my own playing, it's that I just don't have that crisp, nice note separation that I would want to have. I do this demonstration for people who ask about it. It's almost like there's timing, so you could clap your hands in time, but you could play in time like this, but you could play like this.
Yeah.
Or you could play like this. And I'm going for this nice sharp.
Yeah.
And right now I feel like my playing is more like.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So it's kind of a weird way to demonstrate it, but I think it gets the point across.
What do you think might be the culprit? I'm curious, like, because I sometimes feel like that about my own playing and want to know what I can do to make it.
I think a lot. What I've been trying to be conscious of is a little bit of what you just said about maybe. I've heard Ron Block talk about this a bit, and so he's what better guy than that to take as an authority, I guess,
for sure.
He kind of views the fingers almost like triggers, like they have this like firing motion to pick, and then they go right back to that ready position, almost like what you were just saying.
Definitely.
Similar to Alan. Then another thing somebody recommended I try, which I have not worked on yet, is pick more with the tips of the pick rather than deeper into the pick, because then there's more of a metal slide
For sure.
along it.
Definitely.
And it's like this really daunting thing because I've been playing for quite a while now. And so to think that I have to relearn how my fingers hit the strings is like a really scary thing. But
well, man,
I either want it or I don't.
You're already playing great, man. You sounded great in the sound check. Banjo sounds killer.
Thanks.
But it's an endless journey for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me more about the Wooks. Like, if people aren't familiar with that band, how would you describe what you guys are up to and what that sound is all about, or if there's like a philosophy within the band?
Man, I wouldn't say there's much of a philosophy. I mean, as far as a description of the sound, we draw from some of that straight ahead bluegrass, J.D. Crowe vibe, but our founding member, CJ, is really into Southern rock and bands like the Allman Brothers and The Band and Skinner and stuff like that. And so he writes songs that kind of have a bit of that flavor to them that we play. You know, in the Wooks, we have some songs in what we call like the cut time groove, you know, which is like where I'm just kind of doing that for most of the time. But, you know, it can open up some cool rhythmic spaces and provides a little bit of variety from the, you know, boom, chick, bluegrass thing the whole time.
Can't you hear the bullfrogs make you feel good inside? The gators are grunting and the fish are fixing to bite. Moonshine in the live oak tree, there's a hoot owl hollering for you and me. Come on, mama, show me something I ain't never seen. There's nothing in the world could do me better. There's nothing that I would rather do. When you jump out in the water, you might feel something real wash all over you.
And so that's definitely part of the sound. And the band has a few lead vocalists now, which I think is cool. You know, me, Harry, Clark, and CJ Kane, we all sing leads at various times.
Yeah, you guys all sound great. It's a real nice vocal sound.
Thanks, man. Yeah. So,
I will say, sorry to interrupt, but
you're fine.
Definitely, I think most people, if they think they're going to see a band called the Wooks, they're expecting noodly jamming, dreadlocks. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I guess I'm just saying your expectations might be totally unfounded.
Yes. Well, we like to keep people guessing. The name is a constant, point of contention.
Oh yeah, which side of the contention do you fall on?
Well, when I first joined the band, I was like maybe a little bit questioning of it, but that's because I didn't really know the full story. There is a story behind it, and
feel free to tell it if you want. If it's an interesting one,
I'll give you the short version. So the original banjo player was this guy named Arthur Hancock.
Okay,
and he was a great banjo player. He unfortunately had to stop playing the banjo because he had a hand injury.
Oh no.
But he plays guitar now in a band called Wolf Pen Branch, and he's still a great songwriter and singer and still doing it. But, I think he might have gotten the nickname the Wook at some point in his early life or high school or college, just for being a hairier than usual party guy. And, somehow it worked its way into his musical career, and he just sort of embraced it at one point and was like, I'm the Wook. My band is called the Wooks. And now I kind of relish the bucking of expectations that you mentioned earlier, and it's always kind of a funny moment in an interview. We sometimes will come up with fake answers to that question, like it's a family name, or it's just something, or it's actually pronounced the Wooks, yeah.
The Wooks.
So we have fun with it, and we've kind of just accepted it at this point.
Yeah,
as silly as it is.
That's cool. But at the point you were the new guy, so you didn't really have any power or authority to like suggest changing the name.
I was uninitiated, and I had to earn my wookdom.
Wook cred.
Cred. Yeah.
That's so funny.
Speaking of which, I'll see you in the green room later. No, I'm kidding.
Well, let's talk about your instrument then.
Sure.
Tell us what your main axe is here, and of course, go through all the nerd speak about all the parts and the bridges and the picks and the heads and anything like that.
So this is a 2004, I believe, Huber Roanoke banjo, and it's walnut neck and walnut pot, or the resonator is walnut. The pot, I believe, is maple, and I think it's. I don't know what the ring is. I think it's a Huber vintage ring in there. Stainless steel frets, the scale length is slightly longer than a standard, which I'm not crazy about, but I love the sound of the banjo. Presto tailpiece.
So wait, hold on. You said it was a slightly longer scale length?
Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting.
It's weird. I honestly didn't notice it when I bought it, but now I have. It just... it just means the frets are slightly further apart down the neck, which is not ideal. Like I kind of wish I had my old scale length back, but I just think this neck sounds so good, and it does have a slight radius, which I feel like I needed, but now I'm not sure anymore. Yeah, man, that's pretty much it. It's got a Huber head on it, Silvio Ferretti radius 5/8 bridge, I believe. And I'm not a setup guru or a gear guru, but I have had a few banjos, and this is, I think, the best sounding one I've had so far.
So is there something about walnut banjos that you are particular about? Or?
I do like walnut. I think it's kind of like in between the brightness and volume of a maple, but also has kind of that woody, dry sound of a mahogany, maybe somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
And the first banjo that I had was walnut, and I think I've just gotten used to the way it responds at this point.
Nice.
And I'm not opposed to owning all kinds of banjos of all woods at some point, but for now, it's a cool sound.
Yeah. What about, we're here at the gig. We're a few feet from the stage. Yeah. Tell us about like your stage setup and what you're using for that.
For sure. So I have a Fishman Rare Earth pickup in this banjo that runs into a Grace Design Felix preamp. And a lot of people will use the two channels to blend a mic and a pickup, but right now I'm just doing the pickup. And I'm not crazy about it, but it's okay.
Yeah.
The trying to make a banjo sound natural through a pickup is
it's a nightmare.
Challenge.
That's a nightmare
in and of itself.
Yeah.
And the old guys just played on mics, and sometimes I kind of wish we could all just go back to doing that. But you also want to play at gigs where people want to come and have a good time, and that can be a little noisier, and you don't want to discourage the having of the good time. So
the pickup's just a good run and gun kind of solution for that.
The Fishman, I think very highly of that. I have two Fishman pickups now, but the one I had before this, I had on my banjo for like 8 years or more, and it never broke once. It's just like a total bomb-proof thing. Yeah. And I tried other pickups, I really did, and I had issues with them. But the Fishman...
You had issues with the durability or the sound?
The durability.
Oh,
as a matter of fact, yeah. I don't want to call anyone out, but I tried a few other ones, and they were not as hardy.
Not up to the Wook challenge.
No, they couldn't handle the Wook and high impact, high velocity lifestyle.
Yeah, the combat Wook zone.
Spilled beer and all that.
We actually have to wrap up soon. It's almost time to play, but I can't believe I forgot to ask you about your double banjo album. So like plug that real quick, because that sounds awesome.
Sure, yeah. So last summer, well, it was really actually the last 2 summers, I made a twin banjo, I guess you call it an EP. It's 6 tunes with my good friend Ellery Marshall, who's a great banjo player who lives up in Brooklyn.
Yeah, is that from your Brooklyn days? You were buds with him?
Yeah, we were friends up there, and we hung out and played banjos a lot. And Ellery's an amazing player. You should totally have him on the podcast sometime.
Yeah.
And, we both are into albums that have twin banjo on it. For example, my favorite is the Tony Trischka double banjo bluegrass spectacular. Is that the full title?
I think it's
a mouthful.
Something spectacular.
Yeah. I think that album's a masterpiece. And
it's great.
Ellery loves that one too. He also showed me this Tony Trischka and Tom Adams and Tony Furtado record.
The Rounder Extravaganza.
That one's really good too.
Is that what it's called?
I can't remember.
Yeah.
That one's killer. And we love the sound of banjo.
Do you have that
harmony.
original fiddle tunes for banjo? Bill Keith and Bela?
That's another great one too. Yeah, there's lots of great examples. It's a killer sound, and so we just decided to make a little record and hire some of our favorite Brooklyn cats to play on it, and it's out there in the world now on all the streaming platforms.
Do you have hard copies?
I do.
Okay.
I do. Yeah.
I'm gonna
You're gonna
get one
pick
later tonight. I haven't listened to it yet. What approach did you take? I've heard differing things about some people take like really matching the roles with each other, and some people maybe don't care as much about that as long as you're kind of nailing like the main melody
Totally.
notes. What do you say about that?
That's a great question. I mean, we tried to match the roles up as much as possible, and a lot of it comes down to just like playing a little idea up in inversion,
Yeah.
Sometimes it's more complicated than that. But sometimes it gets tricky with the 5th string, because you want to play the role, but you don't want to have to like worry about fretting the 5th string when you're like up in inversion. So sometimes like it's more important to have those just key melody notes that in harmony at the right time. And there can be a little bit of other filler that isn't like exactly a third
completely
above,
parallel or whatever.
Or something. Yeah. And there's also moments where we don't play in harmony, where we're like trading or something.
Man, I'm excited to hear it.
And there's also one that we do where I play clawhammer and he plays 3-finger, and that's kind of got like maybe slightly more loose and interpretive blend to it.
Oh, the cuckoo, she's a pretty bird, and she warbles as she flies. She never cries cuckoo till the 4th day of July.
That's awesome. I'm so glad you guys did that. What a fun, a fun project.
Totally. We're talking about doing another one someday.
Oh man, look out.
Yeah,
okay,
look out.
We got to wrap up, man. It's showtime.
It is showtime.
So thanks for squeezing this in, man. I know it was a little...
No, it's been really fun, Keith. We've been talking about doing it for a while, and
I know it didn't work out a couple times, but
yeah,
here we are.
Here we are. Thanks so much. Cheers.
Thanks again for tuning in, folks. In order, the song clips that you heard this episode were Madison Chimes by the Wooks, Moon Man by the infamous String Dusters, Sourwood Mountain by Ron Stewart, Mudfish Mama by the Wooks, and then 2 tracks by George Guthrie and Ellery Marshall, Cowboys and Indians, and then The Cuckoo. Special thanks again to Scott Wright, who is today's Patreon supporter of this episode. Head over to patreon.com/banjopodcast to find out how to support the show yourself. Plus, you can get these intro and outro tracks without this guy talking all over it and the banjo tablature to go with it. So head over there. Thanks for doing that, and I'll see you all next time, hopefully on Monday.